a lawnmower going next door. Let me check.
Oh, well. Hello, and welcome to Indiepocalypse Radio. I'm your host, Andrew, the editor. Okay, I've got to sit down and organize how you put these things in order one of these times, but I never will. Indiepocalypse Radio, it's a hangout, chat, show, interview sort of thing with primarily game developers. Sometimes they're related to Indiepocalypse, of course, Indiepocalypse being the monthly anthology of indie games, but oftentimes unrelated, or sometimes unrelated. And here we have a mixture of the two, but all here for something unrelated to Indiepocalypse Radio. We have an assortment of associates, people connected to, in part of, the locally sourced anthology one, A Space Atlas. It's Andrew Schurz, Jay Wilson, Steven Zavala, and Lily Valine. How are you all doing today?
Doing all right.
Fantastic.
Pretty darn
Saturday.
good.
Perfect. Now, to get it right off the bat, if people are... I feel like the name sort of implies what it is, but if people are unfamiliar with this locally sourced anthology, how would you describe it? What would you say it is?
I think usually the tag I go with is just a bundle of small experimental games, each
Yeah.
by a different indie dev, with the theme being space, specifically our solar system.
Yes, yeah, no, it is, and it's the if I guess if people are here, it's a model that is very familiar, hopefully. But yeah, it's kind of a thing that it runs rampant in other. I run rampant positively, of course. In other industries, that I feel like sometimes in like illustration in the comics world, you can't like take a step without tripping over some sort of anthology zine. But less common in the game sphere. Locally Sourced itself had done, something similar, but that was what? Let me look. I mean, that wasn't too long ago. Only 2 years ago,
Are you talking about the zine? I think that might have been like 2020 or something.
It was definitely 2020.
Oh
I
my gosh,
remember
that was
vividly.
a while back.
Oh, wait, was it? I'm looking. It says 2022 for the published date.
No, there was another issue that we put
Yeah.
together.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah,
It
that's
was
right.
the one that we used as part of the Maker Fair, and then Mike did put together like another one more recently. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yes. I am seeing the Maker Faire one. I was thinking of like the like the compilation one with like all the like the game collection one.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, we did do that. Yeah.
That stuff is approaching 3 years because time just floats on by. But locally sourced, of course, is also the term is used broadly, but in this particular context, referring to games in the greater Michigan area, I would guess, or within the state of Michigan.
It's a work in progress, but it's like attempt at like a collective. So this was like just a way for us to try to get the name out as more of like a recognizable thing,
Yeah.
Also, why we put the Anthology 1, because the expectation is eventually we'll do another one, probably not until like next year, but should start on that.
Right, but giving yourself numbers, motivates you, or kind of makes you feel like, I'm beholden to this. It creates that kind of self-expectation of beholdenness, to, hey, I got to actually make another one.
Oh yeah, and there's plenty of stuff that could definitely do better, but because personally, like, I'm not the best at keeping myself organized, so then trying to help other people stay like on track for things was difficult. So I got to do better at that. But
right.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's my personal approach is leave them alone and then hope they do everything you need them to do. And I'll say that's worked so far. It's a like so it's you know some maybe just it's worth giving a shot. You never know how it'll turn out.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I was personally like really happy with how all the games turned out.
Yeah.
Especially like the breadth of stuff that put together, like having like a fishing game and like a deep sea exploration thing and like an RPG and just adventure. It was really nice. And everyone had like a different take on what it meant to make like a space game.
Right, because they're besides space, and the Milky Way, was there any sort of like overarching guidelines, or was it like that's your whole guideline, go from there?
Yeah, it's basically just everyone called dibs on something in the solar system, and then however glitter or abstract you want to make that. That's it. Like that's the thing. Is what one concern I did have is what if two people do want to make like a very similar game? You have to tell someone it's like, well,
Right.
we already have someone doing essentially like this thing. I didn't want it to seem like there's a secondary theme. Like, oh, it's all like point and click adventure games. It's like, well, it's not supposed to be.
But you gave people the reins, and it turns out that's just what everyone did.
Yeah.
But
yeah, exactly.
right.
Yeah.
'Cause- I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say it did work out pretty well. That like I don't really think we had any sort of conflicts in terms of like what people made, and we ended up just like a huge variety of different games, which is really cool.
Right, because I think that's the strength of saying, hey, here's some money, or here's a potential of a project. Just make a game, a short game, make whatever you want to make. And I feel like when a lot of the sort of I want to make my version of XYZ, popular genre, like, look, I'm going to make my deck building roguelike or whatever, is that the part of you said, well, I need to make a project that makes money. What is the version of the thing that I want to make that is also a version of a thing that wants to make money? And I think that's maybe where you would get people kind of stumbling upon the same sort of projects. That's what leads the brains that way. But if it's like if you have free reign to do anything within like the broad categories of games, I imagine that's how you get a lot more like stuff that is divergent from each other, and also like whatever a game might be.
Yeah, I think that came up a few times while we were all kind of like tossing around what kind of themes we wanted to make, what we wanted to like focus on, because I think we might have tossed around something more mechanical feeling, but I think we ended up with space because it was it's like a tonal theme and an aesthetic theme, but
right.
I mean, space is everything, right? So
yeah,
it's very easy to make kind of the thing you want, as long as you can kind of figure out what you want to do with that.
Yeah, it's extremely broad category. I think yeah. So of the people here, I'll let you go off, I guess, in a row. I don't know. I'll start with my clockwise order on the thing. And ask like what was your part of the project, or what game did you make, and how your role within the project. I'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah. So I made Lygia. It's the deep sea exploration game. And it's funny, we were thinking about a game in terms of needing it to make money, because something that sort of inspired me about it was David Szymanski's Iron Lung.
Yeah.
That underwater exploration game. And I didn't seek to, replicate that as a whole, but seeing that being so limited in scope and doing so well was like, hey, I could do this. Yeah, this isn't so scary. I can accomplish this. Yeah, sorry, I can ramble for a bit. I don't.
No, continue. Like, so if people Like so what was your approach? If we asked what the zine was about, or the anthology rather, was about, but if for people who are even let's get more granular. What is your game specifically about?
Well, the pitch for it is something was found on the bottom of found at the bottom of a lake on Saturn's moon of Titan, and you are sent to investigate. Um, yeah, so it's it started from kind of a visual standpoint almost. Like I thought
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to create a shader to represent like a sonar effect, and that looked pretty good, and I was like, cool. And then I built out like submarine controls, and that felt pretty good to move around. We got sound effects going, so it was like very immersive. And then we just kind of added. Sorry, I'm using the Royal We.
Yes.
Solo, and then I had a friend do some music. But sorry, I come from an academia background, so the Royal We is just kind of baked into a lot of it.
Of course, yeah, sure. No, you are no complaints here. I understand. The also it helps. I guess I don't know. It softens the isolation of solo development. You're like, yeah, of course we all were working on this project. We, and me and my other me.
Yeah. The us.
Yes.
As it were. But yeah, so started from like a visual standpoint, what would be interesting to do, what is immersive to do, and then there was a kind of a research aspect that went on it as well. Like I knew Titan had an atmosphere. It rains like hydrocarbons. So instead of having like a water cycle, it has like a methane cycle. Probably a pretty terrible place to be. But they have lakes, and they have erosion and hydrology, or like methanology or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was like, okay, this is a cool environment. What would be interesting to go see and go do? And I guess I don't want to spoil things because it isn't a game about discovery and exploration, but just kind of asking those questions of myself and extrapolating out from there was how we ended up with stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's the benefit of not having to think about like what potentially an audience wants from things. He's like, okay, well, it's like, what do I want to end up making? And then you end up following your own sort of like, research ideas, or start diving into things in your own way of being. So you're kind of like, okay, well, what is my kind of like obsession with this sort of thing, or my interest in this thing, and not necessarily like, well, what is like, well, how do I make this, how do I fit this into familiar ideas? Because when you go exploring through like different kind of weather patterns on different planets and moons, you can kind of find yourself thinking, do you fit the research to the gameplay, or the gameplay to the research sort of thing,
Yeah. No, that's always tough because some people want things to be realistic or like historically grounded, and I'm
Right.
kind of the other way. I'm like, nah, if it's cool to look at, if it's cool
Yeah.
to interact with, mission accomplished.
If if you get the concept across, the experience of the idea, it doesn't have to be quite so literal, game. I for a while I was really thinking about how games are. It's the weird thing where maybe they're often the most literal, probably because we are interacting with them. So generally, like, what you see is what you get, but there's more space for kind of interpretive, and what you are playing and controlling isn't literally what is happening, but more representative.
Fair. I guess I lean more towards the representative, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
But yeah, that's it was fun to kind of build outward from that core idea and just kind of grab themes and references to glom onto it. And
Absolutely.
Again, I can ramble for a while, but I don't want to.
No. Oh,
Yeah.
we've got plenty of time to continue to ramble. I'm going to continue around the circle. To
Thank
Jay
you, yeah.
to Jay Wilson. Jay, hello.
Hello.
What are you doing around this project?
So yeah, my only real contributions to the project is, I guess, the conception or bringing the idea up really.
Yeah.
And I did that because Locally Source has done a few itch bundles, but I was thinking if anybody wanted to get experience releasing a game on Steam, like this would be the best way to do so.
Right.
So yeah, that's pretty much my contribution. The game I was going to make, I do not have a title for, but it was a pinball roguelike set on Jupiter, where
Okay.
the pilots pilot the moons of Jupiter. And Jupiter has been infected by some alien source in its core. So you dive deep into Jupiter with its layers being stages and essentially eradicate what's poisoning the planet. So
Yeah.
Pinball roguelike sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like a really fun one, actually.
yeah.
It's one of those things that it brings it back to like the core concept that I realize, or that you find yourself stumbling upon as everything becomes roguelike. You're like, oh, those are just right. Roguelike is just arcade games with like character progression. You know?
Yeah, for sure. I forgot. I left out one important thing.
Yes.
It was a pinball shooter.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, twin stick.
Ah, of course. Right. That is a very. Is the ball the shooter? Theoretically.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, you could use your ammo to influence position, like kickback from weapons to influence position as well in the game. So
Truly in the long. So, what is your familiarity then? I'm curious with other. We'll call them pinball adjacent games. In the kind of like Pinball Quest Odama world, you know.
yeah, the idea was not necessarily Pinball Quest, but there's a mini game. I can't remember which Kirby game it is. It has a mini game that's kind of where the idea spawned.
Okay.
Um,
Well, there's a
a
whole
lot of
Kirby pinball game.
there's what? I'm sorry.
There's an entire Kirby pinball game.
Oh yeah, I was thinking. I can't remember which one it is. There's a
Yeah.
mini game, in it,
Okay.
but
I like how
not
many
necessarily.
Kirby games are just like, hey, this guy's around. We could do something with that.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, a lot of the research inspiration was from Demon's Tilt. If you guys have ever heard
Yes.
of Demon's Tilt, Downwell, and a game called, well, it's now called Star of Providence, but it used to be called Monolith.
Oh shoot. Yeah, those are all great games.
Yeah.
Monolith is cool.
So yeah, it'll see the light of day one day.
Right.
It's still sitting. The project is still sitting there. So maybe for the next next anthology.
Yeah, we'll choose any theme that can work a pinball game into it, which I think is most of them. I think you can work a pinball into
Yeah,
whatever you want.
it's. Yeah, I mean, pinball's rich history is, theming itself on top of anything, you know.
World history pinball. I don't know.
You're right,
Yeah.
right.
A pinball game for every major and minor movie franchise.
Yes. Yeah, no, there's not a single movie unrepresented by pinball. Hopefully.
I like seeing movies that you never expect to have a physical pinball machine that do. It's like how every movie back in the day would have a vinyl soundtrack, regardless of how people see the movie. Like they're still making that record, so it's always
Right.
fun to see. Wow, this one, someone engineered a pinball like for like nothing but trouble. Why? Why did they do it?
But like,
It,
yeah, go ahead.
say it is pretty interesting. I ended up to get into, like, I guess to understand pinball more. I didn't play too much pinball. I went to was it Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum
Oh yeah.
around here? It's in Farmington Hills, Michigan.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it
and,
almost
like-
got shut down.
Yeah.
Oh, is that almost? I thought it was like
Was it shut down?
certain now.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
We went
but-
there last year. It was great.
Yeah, they had some. They had like John Wick pinball. I think they had Flubber still in there. Like, it's crazy.
Oh, Google says it's still alive as of now, so I don't know.
That's incredible. Yeah, I thought it was like on the fence, but it's like a Marvin's. I think Marvin's mechanical. I think it's Marvin's
Marvelous Mechanical Museum.
And they have like a weird collection of like lots of pinball machines, like newer and older arcade cabinets, and then these like weird coin operated machines that like they're like mechanical dioramas where
Yeah,
like
they just put on like a little show. It's
Yes.
like a whole little scene happens.
they're great.
I'm looking at their homepage right now, and I have no context for it, but there's a man, a puppet of a man, in a bathtub full of spaghetti, and he's eating the spaghetti.
That'd be a fun game to make, because it's just little like diorama scenes you get to watch like play out
Yeah.
and like inspect. Just
Yeah, I think there's one machine where you stick your hand in and then you put in a quarter and it pretends that the giant guillotine is gonna come down and chop your hand off, and like it's like stuff like that.
Oh,
Like,
right.
Very
good.
silly.
Oh yeah.
That's
It's a good time.
that's just the Dune box.
Right. Work on the Gam Jabbar. Where's that at?
Yes, yes,
Let's make that a reality.
Yeah, I mean, you can make a reality at any point. You just need a box and a very intense religious woman.
Halfway there.
I'm gonna.
There we go. You know what? Possible theme for our next anthology. Everyone make a Gam Jabbar.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say religion.
I thought you were gonna say like weapons of execution.
Oh
Yes.
no. That's too polarizing.
Yeah.
If everyone makes a Gam Jabbar, we'll be
Yeah.
fine. No one will get upset.
I do like the idea of a theme that is incredibly specific and based on like something that someone still holds the copyright for.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, he wrote that book a long time ago. He's dead. It doesn't matter. You can't do that anymore. Also. Yeah. It's a very. We're not going to go into Dune. I just had a Dune night the other night, and I'm like, man, this actually rules.
A Dune night, like where you just watch Dune. Or
We
you
watched
like,
we watched them both back to back.
Okay. I thought you just
Oh.
had like a themed night that was like, we're gonna just do a Dune night. I have a truck with the sand coming.
Yeah.
Yes. We make sure we are all going to walk arrhythmically around your house.
Yeah. We can't. I mean, sandworms aren't real, but like we can get a really big lizard, just kind of like thrash around under the
Yeah.
sand and be upset with us.
Wrap your dog up in a blanket, tape it shut so it can't get undone, and see what it does.
I mean, y'all
That is
laughed,
great.
but I did a Dune picnic with friends a couple months ago. Bring
did-
spicy food and don't walk anywhere with a rhythm.
Yeah,
What food do they eat in the Duneverse? I'm not familiar with Dune. What do they? What's a Dune themed picnic about?
Mostly people wore costumes made out of trash, and
Heck yeah.
yeah, it was a good
And-
time.
Did you turn the heat up in the place like really high?
Well, we did it outside in like July, so it's still pretty
Oh
warm.
yeah.
Yeah. Got some weird looks from people walking by. You know, it's how you know you're doing things right.
right. You're like, well, we're just having a regular cookout. I don't know what people are looking at, you know?
Anyways, on to the knife fighting.
Yes, right.
Right.
It's really fun if people might suspect you're in a cult. Like they're not sure,
Well,
but like
I-
it's not Halloween, so it might be a cult. Like
yeah, you know, old fantasy and sci-fi novel fandom is not too far removed from cults, so they're not fully wrong. But it is, yeah, no, it is. Dune aside, before we start thinking about, we're like, because I started thinking about the adventure game and like playing the Genesis game.
The board game always seemed interesting to me. I never played it, but I did like
Yeah,
the vibe of it.
I thought like I will be honest. We do a lot of board games every single week, so I did look it up very immediately. But there is like I don't like this particular. I don't know how to say it. It's like that kind of like realistic illustrated style, but where they're trying to make approximations of real people. I don't like the look of it. And they're all like, all the art is like, the character is like, here is Timothy Chalamet in this kind of.
Oh, they made a version of it that's like based on the movie,
Or like the most recent printing of it.
Oh, that's funny.
Has like the movie art.
That does bum me. Like, yeah, whenever it's like, okay, well, now in Lord of the Rings, this is what the characters all look like now. It's like, well, they don't have to. I don't. Like,
Right, they can look like anything.
Great and all, but like, you can.
Yeah, it's like, okay. I mean, he looks fine and all, but he could look like anything.
Yeah.
But since we're talking, Steven, what is your role in all of this?
So I helped organize, which in this case mostly just means sending emails and forms to fill out.
Yeah.
And then I also did, my game was Soul. I got the sun as my object, and it's basically like an arcade sort of puzzle shooter thing.
Yeah.
You're grabbing atoms from this core that keeps spawning them and colliding them together to make explosions. It uses a lot of assets I've used in like previous small projects, like the circular playfield and all like the atom, or most of the atom art was just stuff that I had from like other abstract games I've done. And what?
No, I was gonna say that's a crucial thing that people forget sometimes. Is like just reuse your old stuff. It's the best way to use something is to use old stuff.
And it's funny when like some gamers who are more prone to anger react when like the sequel to a game comes out and it's like, oh, they didn't like make brand new exploding barrel textures for the exploding barrels. It's like, well, yeah,
that's nonsense.
It does the job. I mean, like. Or like, look, they use the same animation for like vaulting over things. Like, yeah, because it was a good animation.
Yeah.
When they first used it 2 years ago, and it's still good now.
Yeah, I am fully Castlevania mode right now, and that is like nonstop reuse from start to finish. You know, of creatures, of animations, of just a lot of things.
Which Castlevanias you playing?
I started at I was doing the Symphony Vania style.
Yeah.
So I've gone from Symphony up to before this very show I was playing Dawn of Sorrow. And
was that the first DS one?
It is. Yeah. And the thing I had never played Harmony of Dissonance, and boy do I love Harmony of Dissonance. It is like you know how you usually unlock like a Belmont mode or whatever after you beat one of those?
Yeah, it's like, look, now I get to swing the whip around and everything.
Right.
So.
And you're like, what if the whole game was you could like hyper dash all over the place and had giant cross barriers and it was cranked up to 11 constantly and that was the entire game, and that's that game.
The Symphony fun fact that I think is true, but I can't recall because I haven't looked at it recently, is that like that was the game that came out on Xbox Live Arcade that caused them to bump up the storage limit for games. Prior to that, it was like 50 megabytes, and they increased it to 250 megabytes per game because it wouldn't have been able to be under the limit when it first got ported to Xbox.
Well, it's a worthy bump up.
It is. Oh yeah.
I think I mentioned.
I always think about that whenever I have like a new game to install that has like a 90 gig install before it launches. It's like, this used to be infeasible. The idea is like, you're gonna download. No, you can't do that. The internet cannot handle this.
And what is gained from it? I sometimes wonder.
1,000 sound clips for crates being dragged on the floor. Like, that's worth it. I can kick stuff around and see the ragdoll physics and go.
I've said, I think I said this last week, and a week later I'm still thinking it. There is still, for as impactful as a Symphony of the Night has, I don't know if there's any game like in that style that is better than it, more interesting than it. Like, it feels like the benefit of being first and not knowing the rules,
Oh yeah. Yeah, it has so many like weird, like rough edges.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that like when people try to replicate either like a Castlevania style or like some sort of like large interlinking world style like in a Souls game, they forget that the things that make those games interesting is the weird little like nooks and crannies and rough edges and like bizarre stuff. It's not just
Right.
like, oh, it's a dark big world. It's like, no, it's a dark big world where like a random staircase could be broken and you find like some item that only exists in that random staircase you gotta break. Like it's that type of
Yeah.
vibe. Like
Yes, it's one of those things where I feel the mystery is the most appealing aspect of it, and like the assortment of just like weird one-use items, and that's the part that gets most easily skipped over. You know.
also for Soul, gotta give a shout to Brandon Seika who did the music. I really wanted to do some like sort of a adaptive kind of music, so it ramps up as you progress and whatnot. And he did really good. It's like it's kind of like this like sort of jazzy like guitar and keys kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want it to be like, I know it's typical for like an abstract like space game to be like very electronic, but I don't know. I just felt like that wasn't really the vibe. I wasn't really going for a game because I feel like that lends itself to like more intense experience, and that wasn't really what I was trying to do.
Right.
But
You
I
can.
do like some intense arcade experiences though.
Yeah, and really you can do sort of anything.
That's the moral of the story. You can do anything.
Right. You can just do anything. Like these rules somebody presumably made up somewhere, but you can just kind of just make up your own rules again.
I think that's interesting in video game development is we don't really have like a formalist kind of like basis for a lot of things.
Right.
It's not really like the way you would for visual art. You have to learn like the fundamentals, and then from there you can experiment. Whereas like game dev, like I feel like it's just everyone kind of messes it up in their own way, and that's just how it functions. Like there's not like one core you're supposed to derive the game from.
Right, because it's harder, I think, to sort of fit games like what's the 180 rule of games.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Like-
and that's another thing that like it gets me sometimes is when folks will describe something as like bad design. And,
Yeah.
like full stop, and it's like, well, I mean, it has its purpose. Like the idea of like, oh, limited save points is bad design. So I mean, it has its purpose, right? Like it increases the tension, and like yeah, it's not gonna work for every game. You're not gonna want like your Stardew values to have like, nope, you saved too many times. You gotta live with all your failures now.
Yes.
But your character's stranded in the wilderness. Like, yeah, you gotta get back to base. That's the thing. Like, that's the point of the game. Like,
Yeah, or like the way that to because it's baked into my brain, the way these sort of the symphony style and Metroid style save room is like it creates almost like discrete levels in a small weird way.
oh yeah, you have to like navigate the floating Medusa heads to get back, and it's like, well, I'm on like 1 HP, so this is not ideal.
And it is like still like fundamentally the same of like playing like a a linear Castlevania, and like completing the clock tower level, but like abstracted into like, oh, it's technically open space, you could go somewhere else if you wanted to, but all that games and mystery and all that aside, or maybe not, moving on to the fourth guest here, Lily. Hello. Oh, there you are. Yes, okay.
Sorry, you caught me exactly as I was drinking from my water bottle, so well timed.
Perfect. It's the gamble you play when you live the no camera life. But I would infinitely prefer accidentally talking to people while they're drinking than forcing you all to look at the camera and smile all the entire time.
Oh yeah, no, it's Saturday and I'm very lazily dressed. So this is the kind of like lazy, low commitment, like perfect chill podcast.
Wait, I
I'm
thought
not
this
worried
was
about
black
looking good.
tie. I'm in like a full suit over here. So.
Oh yeah, no.
You know what, Steven? That's impressive.
I mean, it's very cold in my room, so it works out. But still, it's
That's a typical Steven Saturday, I think.
only Saturday. Yeah.
I do on the weekdays always like very deliberately like do not dress like I am not getting out of like non-dress clothes. Like I'm keeping in jeans or whatever. I'm not putting on any kind of relaxed kind of pants, because I'm still working.
I try and do that to an extent. That was
Yeah.
like something I tried to do during COVID, because otherwise it was very easy to get into the COVID like every day feels the same.
Oh.
Like
Well,
night and day have like merged together,
see the
and there's just like randomly some sleep in there. So
my secret technique was to be an essential worker.
oh no.
and have my day not change at all.
Yeah. No, my technique was to be unemployed, so
Yeah,
that
no.
worked out pretty well.
Right.
That's risky technique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a common technique employed. But games, let's talk about
Games.
them, or one game in particular, which is yours.
So yes, for the Space Anthology, I worked on a game that is called. Let me see if I can actually remember the title of my own game. Don't sing me the blues, please. Sing me a bright red song of love.
Yes.
My favorite game title.
I will never get sick of making game titles that are long and descriptive, and I will never get sick of people mentioning it in articles, being like, "Why did they do this?" Like, but yeah. So, Bright Red Song of Love, because I don't call it the whole thing every time.
Right.
Is it's basically. So I really wanted to make an RPG for a long time. And,
Yeah.
like I got started in game making with like RPG Maker 2000 or something. It might have been 95 even. And so like the first engine and stuff I worked with was RPG Maker. Like I was on the forums for a long time. That's how I met like a lot of my friends. It's how I know like a lot of different RPG Maker people. But I'd never actually finished an RPG Maker. Like I never released an
Right.
RPG Maker game. So I've never made an RPG.
So you're a true RPG maker game dev, I assume. With
Yeah, no, it is.
yeah, with 80 million
Yeah.
unfinished projects.
Yeah, me and the 90% of other people on the RMN forums who wanted to make Chrono Trigger.
Yes. And
and-
how hard could that be to make Chrono Trigger?
Look, I like when I was 17,
Yeah.
I knew like I was capable, and I had considered like I know you can beat Chrono Trigger, and you can look at the credits and see how many dozens of people worked on that game.
Right. Yeah,
But I figured I could also do that.
right, because those dozens of people, those are not like that wasn't like a powerhouse team of seasoned RPG developers or anything. Those-
Just like who Akira Toriyama, like what
do the art.
whatever. I can catch up on that,
Yeah. Whatever. I can draw a little
no.
monkey guy.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, so exactly. So I managed to make like a single dungeon multiple times and then never got anywhere.
Right.
So that was a big inspiration for wanting to make this game. Was like, okay, I want to make a small, compact, cool RPG. I want to use RPG Maker because I've always wanted to make an RPG Maker game, and it's it's a legacy thing. It's like I grew up with it, I kind of I had to have that like checked off my bucket list, I made an RPG Maker game, and I've had this idea for a while for a game where it is like kind of like it's a little bit roguelike-ish. It's a little bit of like a Groundhog Day game, like Majora's Mask or something. Speaking of games that really do well reusing assets.
Right. Yes.
No one was mad when Majora's Mask came out a year after like a 7-year game, a game with a 7-year development cycle, and they're like, wow, they released a totally different game.
That's
because they didn't have to redo it all.
Right. They made their Ocarina of Time ROM hack.
Yeah.
Except they had the source code, so they could make it better, or make it more clean. But it is like, oh, those masks. We had a mask. You could wear a bunny hood in the first game. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it truly. I think everyone should make a cool, like, I'm gonna say quote unquote traditional style game.
Yeah.
And then you take that code, and your next game is like a weird game.
Right.
You just make you're like, oh, I already have this code. Like, what if I just messed with everything.
Right. That's
It'd
why
be a good way to approach things.
I encourage the idea of sketching, of just like making mechanics or things that don't necessarily go anywhere even, but you have the code if you ever want to use it.
Yeah, it's fine. I think reusing stuff is very smart, especially
Yeah.
if you're an indie dev or a hobbyist, because I would not get anything done. I mean, even Bright Red Song of Love, right? So many of these mechanics were just like me remembering that I have old 10-year-old like RPG Maker projects, and I was like, oh, I can copy like some of my custom code from this and
Right.
bring it over, reuse it, and like actually use it in an environment where I'll finish the game. But yeah, so our Bright Red Song of Love is a RPG about two women who are trapped in a temple on Mars, and they're being hunted down by like the spirit of the planet of Mars, who is a malevolent cosmic lesbian,
Well,
and he wants to kill you.
yes. I assume from the malevolence.
Yeah. She's enjoying herself in repeatedly like destroying and reviving the main characters while they like try to escape and stay sane. So it's a little bit of a horror thing. It's like
Yeah.
a little bit of a roguelike-ish game because it's a little different every time, and there's like 100 different ways to like travel through it and approach it. It's basically one big dungeon
Right.
that you can go through and explore and like find secrets and find items, and you like try and get stronger so that when the boss, you have a 15-minute time limit in this dungeon, and after 15 minutes, no matter where you are, the boss attacks you.
Right.
And that was like a concept I had thought of ages ago, because I think like I people complain about roguelikes, and that's
Yes,
fine. People,
right.
but everything, like you said, everything's a roguelike. It's just like a different version of an arcade game, right?
Yeah. Right. Like so many so many roguelikes have strayed so far from rogue conceptually. It is.
Sure.
When was the last time you
And
drank
that's
a potion you didn't know what it was? You know.
Right, exactly. And like I think that stuff is fun. I think there's lots of things you can do with the concept of roguelike and the 10 mechanics that make up roguelikes or whatever. People, it's one of those things that people always try and like define, and it really feels like ataraxia, where it's like people just arguing for the sake of like trying to reach something, but like
Right.
whatever, it doesn't matter if a game's like whatever. There's a bunch of cool mechanics, like use them to do cool stuff, right? So I really like roguelikes, is the point.
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a game in that sort of vein, but I was getting kind of annoyed because roguelikes are getting longer and longer. In terms of like the newest, like the modern roguelike is being like, there's lots of games that go on for like 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's fun, and like I've played a lot of Slay the Spire or whatever, but like I thought it'd be fun to be like, okay, this game will not last longer than 15 minutes because
Right. That is.
so the game is over after that. Like
that it is the weird like genre delineator of like the roguelike where it's assumed that you're supposed to lose at first, you know?
right.
Which
Yeah.
is,
I mean, it's rougher if you have to lose over and over in something that takes 2 hours. And like
Right.
maybe, I mean, if it's fun in its own right, it's fun. Like that. If losing for 2 hours is fun, that's fine. Like that's great. But most of these games are not. Are very. It can be dissatisfactory if you lose, and they take a long time.
right.
So with this one, I tried to make it so like I assume that most people are supposed to lose the first time. I think I've heard from a couple people that they just like powered through it and did fine, but like it's pretty hard. I think
Yeah,
at first, and
but
like, things will kill you very quickly.
I think that's the true like I have no fast and loose interpretations of what roguelikes are, but in my mind a core tenet of is your first run player knowledge aside, like what the game presents you with, your first run is as easy as your 500th run, and like what builds is knowledge, not like a number that makes your stats better.
Yeah, and that was definitely. I mean, that was just kind of and I think both kinds of approaches are good, but for this one specifically, I figured I have a 15-minute time limit. There's like this big dungeon that is just like a static map, so you can learn it over time. It really isn't a roguelike, it's a predictable thing, but you start in different places. And I figured like, okay, you're gonna die your first time, you might die your second time, but you'll slowly start to learn what the dungeon looks like, what items are where, like I can get this item over here and use it over here, and you'll start to path out like a route. Like I actually had some people who showed me that they had drawn maps of the game where like all the items were and stuff like that. They're like, okay, if I do this and this and this, then I can get all of these, and then like you can quote unquote get like kind of a perfect run where you find everything and do everything within the 15 minutes. It actually ends up being like more than enough time if you know everything, but if you don't, you're just kind of like fumbling,
Right.
which it was a fun experiment, I guess, for me.
Yeah, because that's the benefit of it's player knowledge is like the big thing that pays off in the game more than like any sorts of what should I call it, like getting like just like you're not grinding yourself up against it
Right.
in the same way of like I have to grind in order to beat the game, because sometimes you come into that design ethos and you're like, but why is this a roguelike, I guess? And is it and the question is like, is it to make it longer?
Yeah, no, it depends on what you're getting from it,
Right.
And like I think in this case, especially, it's like the first time through, you're like there's a tutorial that kind of teaches you how like combat works, but you're not really gonna know how it works until you see it.
Right.
You're not really gonna know like what abilities do what, and also you're on a timer, so like I really like the time pressure of having a timer ticking down. I think that is fun and interesting. I think one of the most like I think like last year I managed to spark like a massive discussion on co-hosts about this, but I basically asked people how they felt about time pressure in games, or like games like Majora's Mask and stuff. And people have wildly different opinions on how they feel about time. Some people refuse entirely to engage with that, like will not play a game that has, and which is like totally sensible, like it's a stressful thing in general, right? And then some people are like, I love that. Like, I love feeling like I'm being pushed. I love feeling that, it kind of changes the way you approach everything just by seeing that number ticking down, right?
Yeah, and it's an odd thing because, like, or whenever I see those kind of discussions, I always never know how to approach them because it's like, well, both things are good. It's like, we were talking about earlier, like, not everything needs every mechanic, Kirby wouldn't benefit from, or maybe Kirby would. There's a version of Kirby.
I mean, they made a Kirby with a timer.
Yeah.
It wasn't a very strict one, mind you, but
there's a version of like every like a casual Kirby game where I'm thinking because I'm just looking at this Poppy Jr. constantly blowing himself up, but
no, you're fine.
that's why I got Kirby on the brain, especially. But
I always have Kirby on the brain.
Yeah, like if I'm playing Kirby, just like any Kirby Dreamland or whatever, like it doesn't benefit from a rigid timer. But plenty of games like benefit from like in the same way with like you should have gone for the twofer and then asked people about encumbrance.
Oh God, it's so funny because I was just talking about this with my fiance the other day, but we were talking about. I'm noted as not liking encumbrance generally because I think it's very boring and pace killing in a lot of situations. Mostly, I played through The Witcher and I hated every time I had too many swords, and I had to like count my swords and like throw away swords or like see how much each one was worth and like which swords do I want to keep or whatever. And I posted about that once, and I figured like. Everyone agrees with this, right? Like nobody wants to count all their swords. No one wants to. And I had immediately, like, another dev I really respect was like, I actually love, like, I love that kind of stuff. Like, I really think that stuff is extremely enjoyable for me. And I was like, I gotta keep my mouth. I was like, no, but like, of course, like, there's no correct opinion on like when it, especially like what you and Steven were talking about like standards of game design, right? Like. There are general standards I think people approach, like there's almost never any reason to like not make jump on the A button instead of the B button or whatever, right? Like that's like a standard that we all kind of accept. It's because there's not like a lot of impetus to break it. but like any of those standards, like the point of those things is to create an experience and like a tone and a feeling within the player. And so when you start to break those, like, or when you do something like you add a timer, like obviously you're gonna lose some people who are not interested in that kind of experience, who are not interested in the pressure of having to beat an RPG in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And,
However, some people love the hell out of that.
yes.
And, like, you know.
Yeah. And my approach to that, I would say, would be like, hey, maybe it's just not for you then. It's like
Of course.
even before.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No. I was just saying that even before I'd started this whole project, like as a developer, I was already attuned to, hey, if you don't like it, that's fine by me. Like whatever, it's not my problem. Like, and now I'm even further like down the spirit of like, hey, if you don't like these games, hey, that's your problem, not mine. You sort that out with yourself.
Yeah. That sort of stuff only matters when you're trying to make a sales number, right?
Right.
And at the same time, like even if you're talking from a strictly like commercial business standpoint, right? If there is a thing that most games do because it's the standard and because it's safe and because it's, you know, expected, right? Like a game doesn't have most games don't do the Majora's Mask thing because like having a timer doesn't add anything or whatever.
Right.
And I'm sure to some extent that weirder or stranger, more polarizing mechanics like that get avoided in a lot of games because they're very polarized. And like if you're trying to sell a number of copies or whatever, like don't do things that polarize people, right?
Yes.
It makes sense, except for the fact that because that is such a standard, the people who want to make the games that do the really polarizing thing, you're like, oh, well, there's like a ton of room to make games like this because no one else does it. Like,
yes.
You know, like, which is like, you might as well do it. You know, you'll probably find some weirdos out there who like that kind of like time pressure, or who like really, you know, stories they can't understand, or mechanics that feel weird. You know, that's kind of like, I think that's probably where like Sylvie gets a lot of her game stuff from.
Yes.
She's like, I just kind of make mechanics that I think are fun and weird,
right.
And like, you know, for the people who like that kind of, I don't want to say like, I guess just different than what you would consider the standard.
Yes.
Like,
right.
Someone wants that, right?
Yeah, I think it's the language around games is weird because we don't have like the same level of like expected friction that other mediums perhaps do to some degree. That you can be like, oh, no, this is, this is a classic, but also it's not like most of the video game classics are still like popcorn blockbusters. You know, they're very approachable, very simple to get into. They're not like as rough around the edges, in a complimentary sort of way.
Yeah, friction is very fun sometimes. Like,
yes,
I think it adds a lot, and it adds a lot of feeling, and it adds, you know, if you just kind of have to know what you're aiming for or what you like or whatever. I was
watching someone the other day play some games, and he was talking about like a fascination factor, you know, with like bad games or poorly, and just like there's something messed up about it, but like it's also kind of fascinating, and you like want to try to understand it, you know.
Yeah, no, I think it always, you know, especially when you're, you know, I don't know how old everyone else here is, but if you're like me, you've played a lot of video games through your life, and especially you've played a lot of like mainstream, you know, Mario or Zelda or whatever, you start to get really good at predicting what's going to happen when.
Right.
You know the shape of a game when you sit down to play it. Like, it's not hard to figure out, you know, when you sit down and play Mario, like what each level is going to kind of do, right?
He runs
generally speaking, flow-wise.
He runs from left to right, and there's probably a flag in there somewhere.
Right. So, like, at least for me, I love to be surprised, and I love to see people do different things.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, since last year, I have not been able to shut up about Void Stranger.
Right.
But like any like, that's a game that like is willing to just like shut down the game like it will just close the game if you make certain choices, and then you'll load in the game, and rather than loading up where you were, you'll be like sent to a totally different area, and you'll meet a bunch of new characters, and they'll start like, you know, talking to you or judging to you or whatever, and like things happen in that game that you're like, oh, this is like the flow that it had set up, and like that's a game that like. Sorry, I'm way off track, by the way.
No, I think we are, and anyone else feel free to jump at any point. I think we are past the realm of being on topic. We're just we're in free flowing territory talking about games and whatever else.
If I could like rewind all the way back
yes.
to the time pressure thing.
Yes.
Like I like a very tight time pressure. Like okay, if I only have like 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, but like. For me, what gets me stressed out is like a long overarching time pressure. Like you're only gonna have like X number of in-game days to complete this objective.
Right.
Yep.
And then if I ever feel like I'm falling behind, that's like, well, I don't know how to make that up. Like, yeah, I can just like lose and restart the 5-minute timer. But like that's what always got me like the original Pikmin, where so you have this many in-game days. If you're not efficient enough, you could just not do it. You just not actually succeed at the thing. Like as a kid, that was rough. Like.
Right, because you kind of don't see your failure until you're halfway through it.
Yeah, but
it's oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say there's games that do that well though. Like a great example is Citizen Sleeper. They impose a lot of time constraints in that game, but they never feel like unfair. I guess it's because you're not really in any intense situations. Like it's just decisions that you make day by day. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just the environment that it's in, being more of a narrative experience than like, say, I don't know, some intense platforming section, or
I wonder if that might be like an aspect of expressive range too, because I haven't played Citizen Sleeper, but it sounds like your choices are pretty distinct. Rather than like a Pikmin game, it sounds like a matter of efficiency.
Right.
So, yeah, it's am I making this correct, like, discrete choice, or am I shaving enough seconds? Am I like speed running the game fast enough? That seems like a kind of source of anxiety, you know.
Well, it's funny because like a game I've been playing a lot of has like, it's kind of like both types of time pressure. It's against the storm. It's like a roguelike city builder.
Yeah.
Because it is, you have to get like basically you build up the city, and then once it's good enough, you have won that round, and you have to win enough rounds to get enough resources to be able to like unlock the final level, basically to beat that little mini campaign. So it does lead to the situation where I'm like, oh man, that like where you have to like abandon a city because like this is gonna just take me too long. It's like it's better to just like cut my losses. And for some reason, like I have no problem with that. I don't know why. I think just because like it is set up in a like a roguelike pattern where like just playing a single session is satisfying. So if I do happen to have just a failure of a campaign and have to like restart, then it doesn't feel too bad. I don't know.
I kind of wonder. My thought on this, because I've thought about this before, and it comes up a lot with roguelikes, right? Where like there with timers, like with something like Pikmin, right? There's essentially like a victory and a failure state, right? Like you either win the game or you don't by the end of 30 days. I haven't played Pikmin 1, but I assume that's what it's like.
Yeah, I can't remember the time, but yeah, it's basically you got to complete the rocket ship or you lose. And like as a kid, that was just paralyzing. Like,
I think those things are one. I think with Pikmin, it's probably especially scary because like that time pressure that you're going under is like a long commitment, right? Like Pikmin's a long enough game where like to lose after playing 30 in-game days is like, you know, it's like a significant. How long does it take to beat Pikmin 1, right? Like, how long is 30 days? Is it like 10 hours or something? Like, you know, it's a.
Yeah, I think it's like 20 minutes a day or something like that. I can't remember the exact.
It's probably long enough where it feels scarier to like, you know, compared to, again, it's kind of what I was talking about with roguelikes, but like, it can feel worse to lose a 2-hour roguelike and feel like you've accomplished nothing and that you've gotten nothing out of it compared to a 15-minute roguelike, right? And I wonder, and I actually, again, this is just my kind of guessing because I have not gotten around to playing Citizen Sleeper yet, but I think my guess with Citizen Sleeper is that the impression I got from it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jay, but like, my guess is the failure states or like the losing to time pressure states might be more interesting in like their own narrative way than just being like, you lost a game and it's over now.
Oh, very much so. That's actually, I'm glad that you brought that up because I could not find the words I was looking for. But yes, that's exactly it. Like a really good example, no spoilers, is like, um, you're being pursued by the company that made whatever you are. And it's like, oh, well, if you don't do this in like 7 days, the bounty hunter arrives or something like that. But it's like when you hit that 7 days, if you don't do what you need to do to avoid that situation, yeah, it isn't like a lost state. You're just like, oh, well, now what do I have to do to avoid this? Like you could have avoided a bigger problem, but like you still have a chance to like mitigate that issue. It's just a bit harder since you didn't do it in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
No,
You go.
I was gonna say I think that kind of feeds into these sort of kind of like tabletop inspiration style, like of like those tabletop games aren't necessarily about like winning, and like it's failures happen all the time, and it's like, oh, it's fine if you fail because that's people fail in stories, and you're playing through a story. And it's like how do you it sounds like you're just very good at weaving in failure to the game as just like another path you took.
I think that's something I would like to see more roguelikes do. And like, yeah, just games, and I mean, it doesn't have to, I don't think Mario really has to weave in that much interesting failure states.
I want Mario to like have to like deal with his own failure constantly.
And Mario has to jump his way out of hell after he dies.
Yeah, where's my serious made in Unreal, and it's very serious.
Yeah.
Truly.
No. But I do think that's interesting, and I think that's something I see a lot in like roguelikes or anything with randomness is like a lot of randomness boils down to a good result or a bad result. And the good result is good for you and also more interesting or like more mechanically rewarding or visually rewarding or whatever. And the bad result is bad and it's not interesting. And like, I think that's, there are cases for that, right? But I also think it's often more interesting if that's not the case. Like if you can find a way to build those things where failing is interesting and like part of an expected part, like most games expect you to like fail at some point, or they have a threat of failure within them. And we build a lot of games that actually have failure states that you're supposed to not hit, right?
Right.
Like we technically have a failure state because we have to put some sort of threat there, but like dying in, I don't know, Breath of the Wild or something, like what happens when I don't know what happens when you die, but I think you just kind of respawn like pretty close nearby or whatever.
You just kind of wake up somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's just like, okay, well, like they have to put dying as a failure state as a threat to some extent, but it's like, I don't know. I think in general it's just another one of those things that we kind of assume as a standard, but we could build more interesting things into or like play with more. And I think, especially in roguelikes where you're definitely supposed to lose a lot, like
yeah,
you should be doing that. Like it shouldn't feel like a total punishment when you lose. It should be hopefully at least a fun time or an interesting time.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say, oh yeah, for sure. Just piggyback on that. I've been playing Dave the Diver recently, and that's a roguelike. Well, it has roguelike elements in it, like the main part of the game of diving. But they have a very interesting fail mechanic, which the game is quest driven. Like there's quests you have to complete, but if you die in the ocean, your inventory, you get to choose one item to take with you back to the surface. So if that is like that quest item that you need that you went and dived for, you can take that. You can choose like, oh man, I want to make more money during the sushi preparation and serving part. So maybe I just want to take this big fish, which is more expensive, and make money, then redo the dive. Yeah, I think that's a pretty, I don't know if you wouldn't call that meta progression, but you don't completely have to like restart or do any objectives if you choose. So I guess
no, that's I think they also had that in into the breach, you could bring like one like highly trained soldier from a failed run into your next run. It's always
Oh
nice
yeah, that's right.
to start from not like 0, start from, well, it's 0 plus something, and then you get to choose the something. Yeah. And
Yeah.
not to go backwards, but I mean, heck, innovating on sort of failure states. I think it's interesting that we kind of take the Souls-like, you drop your currency upon death, and then that becomes the threat. Losing that. That's a more interesting fail state than simply, well, now you have to reload.
Yeah,
Gone, and, yeah.
and it's weird how much is like it's kind of like been adopted as something like that has been adopted like as a soft standard sort of like midway point between, you know, the kind of like roguelike restart and kind of like standard game just, you know, respawning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it isn't, and it's cool to think of mechanics like that, and it's cool to think of things, I guess, like with failure as a game concept, or with anything really. I think the only thing I could say to like game development standards is like we do have a lot of standards for like how things work, right? We have a standard for like how HP works and
Yeah.
how like dying works and how respawning works and blah blah blah. And I think it's just, if you are making a game, it's worth at least taking like a little look at those and being like, you know, I could do different HP, or like, yeah, right? Like you can
Yeah.
break anything, and like it might actually be really interesting or fun if you mess with what you assume is like the way it's supposed to work.
Just even like the scale of numbers, you know. You know, your you know, RPG numbering that kind of that goes up to, you know, 900, 9,000 health versus
Yeah.
like, you know, you see that and this is probably also like an age demographic thing in the way like the Mario games often deal, and like you're maybe getting wild and you go into the triple digits, but generally it's all single and double digit, which is like very mechanically the same, or for the most part. But it has like a different presentational element to it, and you know, you can do different things within that kind of like, I know I only have 10 at maximum versus 1,000, even if mechanically a lot of the stuff just like you're just multiplying or dividing numbers down along this scale.
I mean, on the other end, I think isn't there like the score in the original like Super Mario Brothers had 2 extra zeros just kind of slapped onto the end of it, so it felt better.
Right. You're never earning 1 point.
Yeah, no, 100 is the minimum because, you know, 100 is bigger than 1. So
Yeah, and it's the weird thing about, you know, numbers in games and how you can kind of slide them all around, and how, yeah, those powers of 10 convey such different things, you know. You know, this guy is scaling into infinity or whatever. Of like, what if these numbers were, you know, what if these numbers were uncapped? What if they just never stopped going up? And
Yeah, I think those are always fun. It kind of reminds me. This is like a very silly thing, but
Yeah.
like, I don't play this game, but I play more fighting games nowadays. And I think I was watching, they had introduced a new character to Grand Blue, which is again a fighting game I haven't played.
Yeah.
But like you watch like people do combos in that game, and you know every time you hit the character, like a combo meter goes up, and you see, you know, you'll go up to like 30, right? Because you did a really long, impressive combo, and like there's a hit that hits like 5 times in there, so you get a 30 or whatever.
Yeah.
And they have a character who's like, I think she's like a goddess or something like that. She's very tall. And they introduced her, and she has like an ultimate attack that she can land with. So she starts up, does her like 10, 20 hit combo, and then during the ultimate attack, she like launches into outer space and blows up the entire Earth with a laser beam. And the combo hit counter starts going up slowly and then faster and faster until it hits like 999 or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's very silly, right? It's over the top and dramatic. It's very maximalist, but like, you know, it's perfect for an anime game. But it's the kind of stuff where you're like, yeah, no one's telling you, like, at this point, who cares about the combo counter, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's fun.
Right.
You know, it doesn't matter.
It's about conveying, like, right, you know, using. I love fighting games. I think about a lot because they are like, if you want to show, like, teach storytelling in video games, play some fighting games. They, like, how do you tell stories and characters with just UI and animations, you know? But that's, like, all they have. And, you know, I mean, I guess there are story modes as well. But, you know, primarily, these are like, how can we convey how Ryu and Ken are different than each other by how they move and which one of them has fire. But
yeah, for sure. Like,
but there is, like, so much of that, like, you know, right, because it's not actually like your character is hitting them, you know, like 9,000 times, but the character is a goddess, so they are theoretically, this is a absurdly powerful attack, and it you know, you can use UI to convey those ideas. Where
it is, you've taken a step back and said, like, hey, like, the rule of this meter is that it goes up by 1 every time you hit them. And then you say, but for the sake of creating a fun experience, I'm going to ignore the rules of this meter because I need to get a point across, and the point is that she's blowing up the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it works. Like, I think that stuff like that's cool. I think, you know, it's like a very minor thing, and it's like kind of I don't want to say it's obvious, but it's like the kind of thing that, like, you can break anything like that. Like, you can just simply choose to do whatever. You can do whatever you want with a game. So,
right.
like, if someone will get the point across in a fun way, that's, you know, hopefully not going to piss everyone who's playing your game off. But, like, you know, why does every Kirby game end with a shooter sequence? Like, because it feels cool. Like, that's, you know.
Yeah, there are, to talk about the Red Man himself. Like, I played Mario World fairly recently, like, front to back, and, you know, that has the natural inclination. It has, you know, secret goals behind the goal. You know, that you have to do the thing that you, in a way, as, like, a player, there's a natural, like, I want to get over the goal. I want to get past it. What's back there? And, you know, in some instances, there, you know, it's like 1 or 2 instances, there is something back there that you need to get to. And it's, you know, you're subverting the very expectation of, like, oh yeah, this is the end goal. I'm supposed to hit this and I win the level, not avoid it and win the level. But it is very much, like, also, like, and that is not even, like, the world of experimental indie games, you know. That is
right.
Nintendo. And I think you can get too deep into the YouTube game design talking guy rabbit hole and realize that, oh no, you can actually do you can kind of do most anything you want, really. Like, people always, like, I think people just adapt to play more than you think they do. And I think that's...
Yeah. I think it's, you know, like, there are those kind of standards, you know. It's probably not a bad thing that Mark Brown is doing what he's doing and, like, you know, letting people know, like, hey, here's games with, like, good cinematography or whatever. Like, that stuff is useful. Like, that stuff is good. And there's a reason those standards are, like, you know, you can kind of rely on them for a lot of stuff, but once again, like, you can do anything. So, like, if you are, like, you know, I think it would be really fun if the camera just kept zooming out until my character was a little dot on the screen, and, like, you were getting something with that, then, like, you should do it. You know. Oh, see you, Steven.
Yes. Steven has left. But yes, no. But no, you're right. It's recognizing the rules, but recognizing that, you know, to go back to the earlier statement, like, recognize the rules so that you can break them. You know. the importance of like, oh yeah, I understand like the baseline of why these things are done, but also knowing why they're done is a good way to know I can just mess around with them, and I can break them in interesting ways. I can, you need to know what people's expectations are so that you can sufficiently subvert them.
Yeah. I mean, Toby Fox made his whole career out of that, I guess. So.
Right.
And
yes.
good music, but
right.
Yeah. Also the music, but like, yeah.
He made a career out of liking Toho, and other games as well, but
yeah, Earthbound.
Yes. Right, which also messes around and with like its sort of like expectations, and it's a weird little thing, like from the very beginning. But it is like, yeah, you can kind of. I think it is part of like the knowing that like games are a very weird thing in the way that we like have to interact with them, in order for them to happen. So it creates a like how do you navigate that? How much are you just sort of dictating to the player what is happening, and how much is the player dictating to you what's happening in the game, and back and forth and all these sorts of things. But it also is very much like it's all this is also like I've played plenty of games that are like 100% linear, and it's like those are good also. Like design rules are not fast and rigid.
Yeah.
In the same way that like that's literally true of every medium. But that all aside, we are starting to hit we are crested over our first hour. We're moving on for a second. So we are in the especially as we have had a guest pop up. We are in, I will call it the wrap up portion of the show. Now, before we get wrap up in earnest, does anyone have any like, I needed to say this, I needed to get this out, any last minute pressing statements?
All good.
I'm trying to think. Oh, yeah, I'm trying to think if we had anything that we should mention about the anthology.
Yes.
Wow, the thing we came on here to talk about.
No, we will talk about that in general. We will. That's definitely we're not going to miss that portion, but sort of like
Can we buy it maybe?
Yes, that is.
Yeah, please buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot more games than even the ones we've talked about. There's like a fishing game. There's a cool like gorgeous abstract poetry game. There's a lot of really, really cool different stuff in there. So.
Yes. Yeah. There it is. Like, that's the other thing. The reason you're all here, the reason for the show. I mean, one of the reasons. The theme of this show being, locally sourced. For as much as I, inherently stay on topic for any of the shows that I do. It is, that is. Anthology works. I am biased, and I think that there should be a lot more of them in games. I think they're a very natural thing for like the hobbyist space. It makes a lot of sense. It's also like a great way to like get it's a good you mentioned it as like, oh, it's a good experience to get on Steam, and it is like a great experience to like, hey, let's get a bunch of people together, release a singular thing. Sometimes it's like great for someone's like, oh, let me get in like my first project. Hey, look, I have a finished project. I'm part of a project. And there's like a great benefit to being like, oh yeah, I finished something. I have something published. I am published somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. That and yeah, just the experience of. I mean, there's people who work in teams, but a lot of devs I encounter work solo, so it is like a good idea to, or not a good idea, but like a good opportunity to like, I guess, open more people up, like
Yeah.
to collaborating. And not that they have to do everything alone unless it's like absolutely necessary.
Right, and it helps, and I think locally sourced broader also does that of like, hey, look, there are people around you. I think the huge one of the huge benefits to having a local scene is that it flattens things in the way online doesn't the same way of like it's very easy for people to identify you as a identify bigger and smaller voices in online spaces in the same way that like everyone showing up to a local meetup doesn't do that in the same way, because we don't have fortunately we don't have all numbers over our heads about how many followers we have.
Yeah, for sure. I do. You can always see. You can never stop being surprised about the things that other people are working on.
Yeah.
Because you see stuff people are making locally, and you're like, oh wow, this is just like totally weird, or something I never would have expected, or whatever.
Right, and someone 5-10 miles from you would have never seen throughout the noise of the internet, but you can see them you can just see their work because it's like it creates a venue for it. In the same way that online, even if you're doing local meetups, even if you're doing them digitally, the kind of implied regional barrier helps to still be an important limiting factor in a lot of ways. It's good to have kind of a bit of exclusivity out now and then, because it helps you. It creates a smaller space that's easier to get into. The ever.
It can. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say kind of like what you're saying. The when you are just online in the space where everyone in the world is online. Not everyone, but everyone in the world is online in a single space. It is hard not to feel crowded out by people who are, extremely popular or well known or whatever.
Right, or even just power users, who are just posting all the time.
Posters.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's hard to, if you're not the kind of person who wants to be posting online all the time, then you're okay, well, how do I?
Right.
I just want to kind of chat with.
Right. You're like, do I just give up because I can never keep up, or? But it's no, you can. Listen, you go to your local scene, you let your local poster take care of it for you. Everyone has it. Everyone's got their regional poster.
Yeah. It is also just and this is kind of again a result of the age of social media. But
yeah.
It is really easy. This may be true for all mediums, I don't know, but certainly with games, because games are a long and arduous process for a lot of the time. It is easy to end up feeling very lonely.
Yes.
I think.
Absolutely.
Especially if you are not working on a team.
Right.
And so local spaces are good for that.
Yeah, to have just a monthly check-in of oh yeah, it's still mostly the same thing, but also other people can, it's not going to be the same 3 people every single time looking at it. You're oh, I didn't see that person. That person wasn't here last month, or.
It's very grounding.
Yeah.
It is. It helps things stay tangible when things are very online, and you're constantly feeling the pressure of being online and stuff. It can feel very lonely, and so seeing other people, especially seeing other people in person, but just having some friends that you chat with and talk to and keep up with, it is a grounding experience that I think is probably good in general.
Yeah, there is, and it is very much I've been thinking about this thing, this idea sometimes of people subjecting themselves to the internet as their basis. Also, I think probably skews their own personal expectations of everything, because they have to be if you're a runner and you are, say you are running at track, you are generally comparing yourself to, your school's track team, so to speak. And like who's the runners there versus, everyone in the world who is on the internet that can run, which is kind of puts people to like unreal expectations of the same, of like, well, I'm making a game, I have to compare myself to every game developer I see online. And it kind of like, well, you're probably seeing also generally a lot of times the teams that have that are bigger than you think they are, or have more money than you think they do, or have been doing it for longer than you think they have.
I get the feeling it's kind of a sampling bias. Like
Yeah.
You're seeing the things that are popular and are being shown to a lot of people. So, yeah, you compare yourselves to, big teams, as you were saying.
Yeah, and you're like, why does my plane keep crashing? Look at all those planes coming back. What's wrong with mine?
Oh, you work for Boeing, so
Oh.
Sorry, that was dark.
No, that's funny. It's a weird thing because it is totally based in illogical thinking. It makes zero sense, and maybe other people don't do this. But as someone who, the reason I like social media and stuff is I get to see a bunch of other cool people who make stuff, and like, I like seeing cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
And I get to chat with people who who are nice, to some extent, to the extent that social media allows you to do so.
Yes.
But I don't think social media is very good for actual conversation.
No, that is
different.
I am like, social media. I've come to the conclusion social media is great for meeting people, terrible for talking to people.
Exactly. Yeah. I just tell people to look, if we're mutuals, if we know each other, message me on Discord if you want to chat, because I will have a conversation with you there.
Yes.
I will not have a conversation. We're not going to have a conversation in the comments or whatever.
No. I am like, meet me in person, or hey, I invented a radio show for this.
Right. But but here's the thing. It's like, as someone who follows artists and stuff online, it is hard. It sounds wild to say. Yeah. But it is hard to forget that you are looking at the work of hundreds or thousands of people.
Yes.
and I'm just being like, well, why haven't I made all of these great things? Why can't I make cool stuff like this? And I was like, well, that's because it's hundreds of people.
Right.
I'm watching a feed of people doing cool things, and I was like, even if I do a cool thing, there's 100 other people. You know what I mean? It's the weight of it doesn't make any sense. But I was like, well, I can't.
Yeah, you can't.
It feels pressure.
Right, because you're like, well, I don't have any other comparison point, and you're like, this is my comparison point, is these people, not like the my local people that I can compare with. And it's like, becomes like, I'm the world's smallest fish ever made. Then you're like, oh wait, no, there are tons of fish around the same size as me, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes you feel like, well, everything's been done already. What am I gonna do that's gonna be useful or interesting, or it can be good in ways, but it can be very, very depressing in ways.
Yeah.
And I think it is, I think we are probably past a point of life where you can totally remove yourself from it, especially if you're making games or whatever. I'm unsure of what I want to do with the concept of social media in my life as of this point.
My recommendation is posting 5 times a month whenever you do something.
It works really well for some people. The thing is, occasionally I get to meet and chat with people who I actually really enjoy talking to after that happens.
Right.
And so that I don't want to lose, but I also just want them to talk to me and not post.
Yes.
I don't want to post.
Posting is
I don't know.
I've talked about this on the show before. Posting is extremely odd. It's like, imagine if you hung with your friends, but the way you talked is you just kind of talked about things and hoped someone else would ask you about it or would comment on it. It's not it's a really awkward way for human interaction. It's like,
it's a very strange thing.
It's your friend with a new hat who's very desperately, clearly wanting you to ask them about their new hat, but you can't have the conversation until that you ask them about it.
Yeah, like I hope someone. This is. I mean, to be fair, people do that, right? Like
Yeah.
people walk in with a new haircut. and
Yes,
they're
no,
like,
I know.
Please ask me about my haircut.
I know people like that, and I avoid it.
Yeah.
It's the game of avoiding asking them about it. Like, nice try,
Yeah.
buddy.
No, I just forced. I will simply power through until and be like, no, hey, let's talk about my hair now because I think it's great. It's like
Right.
you simply you don't have to play that game. You just be like, I want to talk about this.
Yes.
I'm very proud of it.
Exactly. That's part of my game. It's like, if you want to talk about it, just mention it. You don't have to like trick it out of me.
Yeah, for sure.
But that is like, and also like I just don't. My friends and people in life are often also not as willfully obtuse as someone online is, and it's like, you know what I'm saying, like, you know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you can't be people who want to who want to willfully misinterpret you. Like,
Yes.
There's no way to not play that game. So I don't know.
You just kind of. I don't know the approach to it. Just ignore them. Just block them and move on with your life. But yeah, it's an odd thing. I am a staunch hater of social media, but I use it as a great way to meet people, and then use that. It's also very weird to have conversations in public. I think it's very odd to me. Like, I don't like to do it.
No,
Right.
of course. Like I wanna have talk with someone and have like a personal conversation where people,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, whenever I've talked to people, it's always been like, like you said, in private messages. Never like is the equivalent of like getting on stage and just having a casual conversation on microphones in front of 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Very, very weird. But that all said, that's why I invented this show, to talk to people. And I have some important questions for new guests. The important Indiepocalypse Radio questions that I ask of every guest. And if there are any updates, Lily, feel free to post updates.
No. Ask everyone else first.
So I'm going to start with Andrew. I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
What's your favorite type of rock?
Ooh. Okay. That's a little bit tough. Sorry, the handle that I go by in a lot of like online spaces is taconite these days. And
Okay.
Actually, a type of iron ore.
See, I did not know what that was. I was like, taco nights?
Everybody says that, and that's okay. I kind of like being obtuse in that sense.
Yeah.
So that is one answer. I guess I'm gonna have to go with banded jasper. Actually, it's another type of iron ore, but it's also a semi-precious stone, and it looks like tiger stripes a little bit.
Perfect. I had to look up taconite. It was a new rock presented to me. Jay, follow up. Same question. No, you've had time.
Yeah, I've had time. I don't know if I have a favorite rock, but a rock that I like, I actually saw in around downtown Rochester Hills, is called opalite.
Okay.
It's very like it's kind of like translucent opal, of course.
Ooh.
Very, very pretty rock.
Now,
Yeah, these are super pretty.
and now opal, I am of course familiar with as it being a classic video game rock.
Is it?
One of the I feel like opal is one of the standard gems in games. Maybe not as much as like a ruby, but it's there.
True.
Yeah, I think did they have opals in Diablo? I don't remember.
They do not. Diablo, of course. Are we talking Diablo 2, which is, of course, topazes, rubies, amethyst, diamonds, emeralds, and skulls, of course, the final gem.
The most important rock?
Yes.
Yeah.
The most important rock, the skull. I played a lot of Diablo 2. Like, a lot of that game.
Yeah, I did too.
An obsessive amount, but now I'm like, should I play Diablo? No. It's something I think about. It's like the worst curse upon humanity is that they remade that to make it easily playable. And it's like, what if I just played Diablo 2 the rest of my life? And just made every type of character build possible and collected all the gear. There's an appeal to a fine... I think of... To not get too distracted before we get to the second question. The appeal to me... And I think of this as like almost like a like how I think about games in some sense of like the difference between Diablo 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And that is like Diablo 1 and 2 I can finish. Like there's an end to them. And there's an appeal to that, a theoretical like I'm never going to collect it all, but there's an appeal to a theoretical endpoint. As opposed to like the live service version of like, oh, they're just always making more of it, and there's like there's never an end to it, and maybe I just want things to end sometimes.
I think I agree with that generally, and like, it's funny when you play something like a really replayable roguelike. And you play it over and over again, then suddenly you've played it for 300 hours.
Yeah.
And like the reason you stop playing that game, because it's so replayable, the reason you stop playing it is eventually like because you got tired of it, right? Like you got bored and you moved on, which is a weird emotion to end a game with compared to like a game that naturally ends or a game that, you know, like maybe it goes on longer, but like has essentially said like you can stop now.
Yeah.
A game like that, you can end on a high note, right? But a roguelike is never going to end on a high note in that way because you're eventually just going to be like, I'm kind of done, you know?
Right.
Like, I think I did that with Hades, where like I played a bunch of Hades and I was like, I'm kind of done with Hades, like, you know?
Yeah, and sometimes like you might go like it might be something like, oh, I'll go back to it. It's kind of like, you know, if you ever like, oh, I'm going to listen to this album nonstop until you start listening to something else.
Yeah.
Like the kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just simply done with this experience. Partially, I think probably just like, oh, I want something new. I want something different. I guess that's the difference between like, whether you quit it because you wanted just something, you want to try, you were into something else, or did you tire of it, you know?
Right. It's like it's a very strange way to end an experience that you theoretically liked.
Yes.
You know, because you played it for 300 hours, but then your last moments of it are like, all right, I'm kind of done.
Yeah, right. And sometimes it is
know.
like I've come in that situation like dissatisfied, like why did I spend all this time with it? What a waste. There's back when I tried. I'm not gonna. Never mind. I was gonna mention a game. I was like, I feel like I've bullied it enough. But speaking of games, I don't like to bully. Jay, I'm gonna start with you this time. What's your favorite Toho character?
Which character?
Toho. Touhou, of course.
I don't know anything about Toho.
You're not
Yes, I'm that uncultured.
That's one of the correct answers. No,
yes,
that's correct.
That is if the one reason I would want this show to be more popular is that there would be someone keeping stats of that, of both who is the most popular Toho, the front runner, and also like it's probably, I think it's Cyrano. It's probably Cyrano's the front runner, honestly.
Oh, boy.
Or one of the standard three. You're like your Remus, your Marisas, your Cyrano's.
Yeah, people really like Cyrano. I think it might be Cherno. I'm not sure.
Cherno.
Actually.
I've never. That's
I don't
what,
remember.
You're right. Cyrano's.
No one gets that. Yeah. Yeah.
Cyrano. That's the thing you use to heat up your catering, right?
I have no idea.
Is that is that Cyrano? No, it's Sterno. Sorry, that's Sterno. Now that I think about it, those little pucks, those little fire pucks or whatever.
I've never seen this.
A little alcohol fire or something.
But all this is to say that Jay, acceptable answer, might be the majority answer.
I'm curious about it. Like
Oh.
the only thing I know about Toho
Yes.
is more curious just to know exactly what it is because I keep hearing about it. And
Well, you see,
the
Toho
most
is
I know about it.
it's
I'm
a
sorry.
long-running Danmaku series. Danmaku, of course, I think translates roughly to like bullet curtain, something to that effect. It is a long-running bullet hell franchise, although of course highly responsive to prayers was more like of a block-breaking game. This was way back on the PC 98, of course. There was stuff was coming out. Was it Kamita? I think he was releasing it. It's a long series of Dojin games, primarily by. We don't have time to get into all of Toho. Tune in January where I'm fully dedicated to running Toho 101 during the Indiepocalypse pledge drive. For all the guests who were like, I didn't know what Toho was. I'm like, well, let me tell you what Toho is. And what
I wrote a long digression of it once because people kept asking me.
Yes.
And now it's just like, all right, I wrote a primer on it, so go.
Something distinct about Toho is that anyone can make a Toho game and sell it, and we have like a Toho author we have here right now with us. Yes.
I'm so happy that actually happened. I'm so happy. I was so surprised that no one had made a Toho game in like 50 issues of like 10 games apiece. No one has popped in a single dozen. That's a shame.
Yeah, and like
shame.
I had truly thought like I thought like a couple times like how do I commission someone to make a Toho game, like because I don't like to tell people what to make at all. But it is yes. So it's like Jay, if you could theoretically make a Toho game within some parameters, sell it on Steam by yourself, you're good. Perfectly allowed.
It doesn't have to be within like that. I guess shmup realm.
No,
I think there's one. It's like something Gen Festival. I don't know.
Yeah.
Some.
Oh no! Here's me. I have to say the word out loud.
There are
Gensokyo is I believe the term you're probably looking for.
Yeah. I think that's a Metroidvania.
There is one that is that I do highly recommend. I forget the name of it. It's the Sakuya Star.
Luna Nights.
Luna Nights.
Yes, Luna Nights.
Luna Nights is so good.
Yes,
that's actually how I got into Toho, was playing Luna Nights. Finally.
I also highly recommend Team Ladybug's their Lodos War game as well. If you're looking for a more,
I just beat that like 2 weeks ago. The Deedlit and Wonderland.
Yes.
Yes, I just beat that. Fantastic game.
I truly, it's killer, and it also like there's. You know how they're like. I think a lot about like sometimes there's just like an iconic shot in something that's just like absolutely rules, and it is like I think a lot about the chapter intros to Deedlit and Wonder Labyrinth, which are like they're dice hitting a thing, and it falls into like the die side facing as the chapter it is, and I'm like, it's because it comes from tabletop role playing games. It's so smart. It's so smart. Like, yeah, and if you want a game that just plays like those symphony games, that game plays like those. Like you're like, oh, those are these same animations. Like, it is shameless in its influences, but it also is like gorgeous to look at. And
absolutely
super smooth. But yeah, so that is, So I mean, if you like that, like, highly recommend just popping over the Luna Nights as like a Toho intro, because it has like near misses and all. I forget the word for it. I'm blanking on the word for it. Grazing.
Graze.
Yeah.
I believe in you. Yeah, you got it.
Yes, it's got actual like great. It's also very fascinating to how like people like work grazing and like basically Toho mechanics into like grazing and focus and all these ideas into like Metroidvanias or roguelike deck builders and all these other like non bullet hell games. Even though, strictly speaking, you don't have to do that, but it is like part of the fun. I think is people interpreting those ideas. Don't think they did that with the Izakaya game. I don't think there was grazing in that. In the bullet hell sense, in the coming and eating sense, there is some grazing.
Oh my gosh, that's a terrible joke.
Yeah. True, but I found it.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Landed it. But
now I'm very curious. Maybe I can take the pinball project instead, turn into a Toho project.
You could, there you go. There's locally sourced anthology 2, Toho.
Oh gosh, the nice thing about Toho is that it is hard to name a game genre that doesn't have a Toho game in it.
Yes.
So if you're not the kind of weirdo who likes to play shmups a lot or like bullet hell,
yes,
you can still indulge yourself in a lot of Toho because there's so many games that are like Pokemon or Slay the Spire or whatever.
Yeah, or Cafe Sim.
Yeah, that's right.
And that is like, and also that's I think a great entry point if you're like looking for something that's not a bullet hell, because it also has all the characters in it, and you can be like, oh, let me look at all these characters that I like, and then you have an answer. Andrew, important question: do you have a favorite Toho character?
I do not have one, but I do appreciate how Bad Apple is like how ubiquitous it is.
Yes.
And as soon as they have the ability to like display an animation in whatever like novel sense, they're like, okay, we'll put Bad Apple in it.
Right.
Okay.
No.
Okay. People might not like me for this. I did not know that's where Bad Apple came from. I just assumed it was an anime. I haven't watched yet.
Oh yeah, no, it is. That is the source. Those are all Toho characters, and that is also like if you were like another great thing to know if you want to play a bunch of rhythm games. Oh, it is Cherno. I looked at I'm on the wiki, and the katakana is Chirano. I think yes. I had a blank for a second. Like, is that katakana or is that hiragana? I was like, I had a moment where I forgot which was which. But yes. If you're into rhythm games, whether it's a Sega game, a Namco game, or any other, they all have Bad Apple on them. I learned when I was in Austin and I went to an arcade, and it was like, oh, all these rhythm games all have Bad Apple. So it's like your like lodestone as you need to learn. You're like, I don't know any of these songs, but I want to learn how this game plays. I do know Bad Apple, so I can just play Bad Apple and learn what all these knobs and these buttons and man, I wish I could play I wish I had a bunch of stand-up rhythm games there. Just like give me a lot of money so I can get a very large house and fill them full of rhythm games, so I can play them whenever I want.
I'm sorry, if you have a bunch of stand-up rhythm games, you're actually obligated to be someone's upstairs neighbor.
Yes, well, I will be. Like, I will keep them up. If you give me all the money, I'll let you sleep underneath. I'll let you rent a room. You know what? I'll let you live there rent-free even. But you have to listen to me play rhythm games all day.
Right.
That is your rent. But that all said, speaking of getting people out of money, we're wrapping up the show properly, and we're going to go around the circle, and besides, we'll say, up at the top, of course, locally sourced anthology, 1: Space Atlas. Go check it out. I almost put that in the Discord. And if you just search like locally sourced anthology, I think you've got good enough SEO that'll get you there, I believe.
I think
Yes.
so.
Yeah, you got
Yeah,
it.
it is perfect.
You got the SEO. But you're all also here individually. So if start with Andrew. Andrew, if people wanted to find your stuff, where would they look for it?
That is a good question. I'm mostly on what you know the artist formerly known as Twitter,
Yes.
as Taconite Games, and then I am also on Blue Sky as just Taconite. Yeah, I'll probably have a more official online presence eventually, but yeah, come check me out. I am making a archery retro FPS right now, and it is consuming my life.
Perfect. And I assume
Ooh.
from those socials, people can get to any other links you may have.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Everything's we're putting the hyper and hyperlink. So,
Ah, perfect. Jay Wilson, hello. Where can people find your stuff?
You can find me on pretty much everything. Instagram, Twitter.
Yes.
We still call it that.
I
YouTube, Twitch, anywhere is Jay's on the Moon.
Oh, you love to see a unified username.
Jay's on the Moon. Same thing with I have studio socials as well. That's Moon Metro Digital on everything. In terms of personal stuff, I have a it's a word game. If you've ever seen Bookworm Adventures, but it is a RPG that I have been working on and getting ready to actually submit for a grant. And yeah, not necessarily mine, but I've worked on it. I've worked on it. Play Risk: Global Domination on Steam by SMG Studio. I design a lot of those maps. You wanna?
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Risk,
Yeah.
you may have heard of it. Oh, yes, no, yeah, that is... you've probably got good SEO there. I think people know. I think people can find Risk. Yeah, no, definitely. Check out those works. Speaking of, like, when we're talking all about, like, these, like, infinite games, roguelikes, replayables, I thought about it occasionally, but we didn't even touch upon the idea of digital board games, you know.
Oh,
Whether it's a more literal adaptation like Risk or, like, you know, Civ is ultimately like a digital board game. But-
absolutely.
But that's a whole other thing, and we're wrapping up the show. Lily, where could people find your work if you're looking to find it?
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm Lily Feline. You can find me on, I think, pretty much most of the major social media sites now as at It's Me Lily V. It's Me Lily V.
Yes.
I'm on like Twitter, co-host, Tumblr, Blue Sky, Mastodon. I'm trying my best. We'll see how much I hit all of those, but
Right.
you'll probably find some stuff by me there.
I've been pruning. I've pruned a couple sites lately, where I
Yeah. I'm testing the waters on all
Yes.
of them. So, but if you you're a fan of one of those sites, follow me on that site, and if at the very least you'll probably see me draw some stuff with
Yes.
pencils, and you will see me make games about lesbians. So, and I will tell you about those games on those sites.
the
So follow
perfect
me if
platform
you'd
to
like
do such a thing.
Yeah. So yeah, I make games about women who are trying their best, and I'm gonna keep making games about that. So, yeah, I don't have anything to announce for my next game.
Oh,
I did
that's-
work on a game called Boss Game: The Final Boss Is My Heart,
Yes.
which is about two girlfriends who hunt devils to pay the rent. It's like a boss rush game where you have to control two characters at once while you're doing combos and like trying not to die.
Yes.
It's pretty good.
Highly recommend. I think in the first time you were on was in the context of promoting Boss Game, or that I just was like, Boss Game is cool. I should have this person who made Boss Game on.
Yeah. That's what we chatted about the first time.
Yes.
And yeah, Bus Game, I'm pretty happy with it. People
Yeah.
seem to like that one.
Boss Game's still cool.
I've had. Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, people have said some nice things about it. So
Yeah.
if that's, if you want to see women flirting and fighting demons or devils rather,
Yes.
go ahead and check out Boss Game. Otherwise, I'm on Twitter on co-host and all those different places I said. So
Well, perfect.
feel free. I will make another game. I am working on one currently. It is nowhere near the point where I can tell you about it, so
Yeah.
I apologize.
No.
But that gives me another excuse to hack and jump onto your show at some
Yes,
point.
no, that is.
If you need me.
Lily, I wish people would be like, I'm making a new thing. I want to promote it. Andrew, let me be on your show. That is my dream, because I think more people should just do that. They should have venues where it's like, I know XY people can help me promote my thing. I'm gonna go on to their show, do their thing or whatever. So I'm always here to be the show people go on to promote their thing.
I always feel, it all goes back to trying to survive as an indie dev and make money and market and promote yourself and stuff. But I never want to I was like, look, Andrew's a busy guy. He's got so many cool indie game devs to choose from. I'm certainly not going to bother him with my dinky little stuff. He's got, whatever.
I still think my thing is a dinky little thing. I'm like, why would Lily be bothered with my dinky little thing? It's the self-loathing is part of the independent art space, The I have nothing. I am nothing. The secret is we're all nothing, and the real secret of all art is that after we release it, 90% of it, 95%, 99% of it will be forgotten about in a year. Whether you spent $0 to make it or $100,000 to make it, or $5 million to make it, it all gets swept away by time. So. For any consolation, that is.
Is that consolation? I don't
know.
No. Here's what I'll say. I want a corollary to that.
Yes.
I think you're probably not to. Oh, what's up? Yeah, not to drag this whole conversation on longer.
No.
I know we're wrapping up.
No, this.
But I will.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is still part of my closing, so it's fine. No, I think that the one thing I could say is that if you make something and 1,000 people play it, which is already very cool. 1,000 people took the time.
That's a lot of people.
Time out of their day to check out something. That's really sick, right? 1,000 people had anything they could have done that day, and they played your thing. That's cool, but most of them are gonna forget about it, right? 999 of them, they're gonna forget about it by next month or whatever. But maybe you got one or two people who are like, wow, that really that really kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
And it's gonna become their weird little thing that they're thinking about every year or so. They're gonna be like, wow, that was a cool little game. That was a cool thing that if you get that, pretty good place to be, I think. If you can do that.
That is my teleport tower plus. I think about all the time. But I think I also think of that sentiment, my express sentiment, as a positive thing, where it's no, it's not like your thing didn't make an impact and got forgotten. Everybody think that's just humanity. We all are we all are we all come and go, so don't stress out. And so much stuff gets rediscovered after the fact, and I mean it's also not reassuring to tell someone, don't worry, your work will be appreciated 10 years from now. They're like, well, what about right now? You're like, listen, some of us have to be visionaries that died penniless,
Yeah.
In order, and, they'll make statues. Well, they'll give out statues with our faces, but good.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the stuff now, it's truly a pleasure in the moment as well. I would you don't trade that stuff for a moment. It's more like, hey, don't worry about it. Hey, don't worry about it. Hey, don't worry about it.
Well, that's what I try.
Yeah.
Speaking of like reaching out to people, and like I'm trying to get a little better at that. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to take my hobby of like I'd like people to play my games more, and maybe I'll go reach out to some Twitch streamers to like
Yeah.
do that. And the one thing I can say I've kind of tried to remember about that is that like, look, if you send an email to some Twitch streamer, and you're like, hey, could you check out my game? Like I know you like other games like this, and maybe it'd be cool. Like the most likely thing that might happen if you get a quote unquote bad ending to that situation is that they will simply ignore you and forget about you immediately, which just means that you can do it again in like 2 years when you release your next game. You can try again, and like they probably who knows. You're not hurting anyone, right?
Yeah,
doing
right.
That. You're just like, no one's gonna like unless you're an asshole. But
Yes.
like unless you're not an asshole, like the thing that's gonna happen is they're gonna be like, oh, I didn't know this person has ever talked to me before. Like,
right. No,
who cares?
I send nonstop cold emails. Like that's just a thing that I do often. And it's like if they don't answer, you go, whatever. I guess you just don't worry about it. But we're getting trapped. This is how we wind up in the fabled third hour. Is that we try to wrap up and then we just like, we like to talk. People like to talk about things, and there's always more things to talk about. But
I mean, we have a bunch of Michigan devs here, so we're doing a Michigan goodbye.
yes, I see. I handle things differently. I'm being a classic like New Englander. I am adept is what they call the Irish goodbye. Of simply leaving and not saying anything. And they're like, where did Andrew go? He's gone. He just left. Did not check out. Was just pieced out. Which is the ideal version, if you ask me. But that said, to know we're truly ending, of course we mentioned it during the fact, Indiepocalypse.com is where you get the aforementioned Indiepocalypse. The thing I do, a new one just came out yesterday. It's got some real cool stuff in it. They've all got real cool stuff in it. One of them's got a Toho game that Lily here made. So you can get those, and it helps support developers. So you can get that sweet every 6 to 12 months. The developers get $5 to $8. But if you buy it more, that number goes higher, and it happens more frequently. But and if you want to join, of course, indiepocalypse.com/submit. There's a Patreon, indiepocalypse.com/Patreon. You can get Indiepocalypse and other games, like aforementioned boss game, even physically, in what I call tapes, because they're inside cassette cases at either indiepocalypse.com/tapes for Indiepocalypse or pizzapranks.com/tape market. I think that's everything. Those are all my URLs. If you think I have a thing and you wonder if I have it, type indiepocalypse.com/that thing. If I have it, it's there. That's it for Steven, but also Lily, Andrew, Jay. Thank you all for joining me here today. Glad to hang out and have a show. True pleasure having you all here.
Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, seriously, it was fun.
Yeah, this is a ton of fun. Thanks.
And see you all later, everyone. Oh, wait. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening. Got it again. Keeping up the streak. You gotta thank people for listening. That's how you form the parasocial relationship with them, which makes them more willing to give you money because they believe that they're your friend. That said, goodbye, everyone.